This is a production of Cornell University.
I'm Phil Griffiths, also go by Griff. I'm a vegetable breeder here at Cornell AgriTech. I'm also part of the School in Integrative Plant Science. My focus is on primarily Brassica vegetables, but I also do work on small fruited tomatoes and common bean. Probably about 15, 16 years ago, it was becoming quite clear in vegetables at least that quality was becoming a lot more important generally. Consumers were being more involved in food systems and helping to drive changes based on purchasing decisions. So around that time I started to make quite a few changes away from traditional efforts like disease resistance, adaptation, yield, and more towards selecting quality traits among the vegetables I work on. One of the first efforts started in about 2004, and that was getting a lot of the variation that exists in the heirloom tomatoes. That's a project that's still going on today. These almost finished high tunnels that we have here, that's some advanced lines from that project. They're all primarily indeterminate small fruited types. And they're aimed at the developing medley groups that you see more commonly in supermarkets, farmers markets, etc. So among the types I've been working on, I've got at least 8 different colors, because you can have colors like light orange, peach, and dark orange just within the orange group, and about 8 different fruit shapes. So I've been developing tomatoes that are chili shaped, finger shaped, baby bell pepper shaped, baby beefsteak shaped, baby pear, and also some of the traditional cherry and grape types. So these feed into that consumer preference of wanting some variability in appearance, taste, texture, and just making foods more colorful and fun, essentially. So we're starting to see quite a bit of interest with that pickup. We have some of the early stuff out with high mowing seeds for the Galaxy Suite. We're currently testing with Wegmans supermarkets here in upstate New York in the Rochester and Canandaigua area. And looking on how we can promote these sort of higher quality variable types with the small fruit where you have the individual bite, which is ultimately what consumers prefer. So a lot of that selection is done in upstate New York, where we get a lot of blights, early blight, Septoria blight particularly. Growing the advanced selections in tunnels helps considerably with that. These tunnels were recently constructed, so the planting is a little bit late this year. We just pruned and trellised the plants. It's early July and muddy here, but these plants now will probably be 10 times the size in about 3 or 4 weeks. But it represents some diversity of genotypes and germplasm that really contribute to making food a little bit more interesting. In common bean, we've also gone in the same direction. I have now mini kidney beans, black kidney beans, purple kidney beans. Ones that you might say are familiar, but also different. People are familiar, of course, with dark reds, so moving to purple or black is not that much of a change. So my main crop group is the Brassica vegetables. They comprise probably 50 or 100 different market classes, because even within cabbage you can have Savoy and red and flat Dutch, etc. So traditionally it's had more of a focus on cabbage which of course we still work on, developing F1 hybrids of rosé cabbage for testing currently. And also the other main market classes of Brassica like broccoli and cauliflower. More recently, over the last decade or so, that focus has moved a lot to the leafy brassicas, the kales, and the kale groupings. That started probably about 2008 when I started working on Sukuma wiki in Eastern Africa, which is an African kale type. And then as the market for kale started to develop in the US for salad markets in particular, a lot of those efforts started to get sort of fused in to a common focus of selecting for color and shape in the leafy types. So there's a lot of variation among the market classes of brassicas. You have Brussels sprouts with auxiliary buds. Cabbage is essentially a terminal bud. But in screening a lot of the germplasm, we started to focus a lot on leaf color. That included the yellow, golden leaf color that's found in cabbage collard. We started that project in about 2009, 2010. And also started to focus on a lot of anthocyanins, which produce the purple colors in the leaves of the brassicas, looking at brassicas as a source of natural colors with anthocyanins. So as consumer demand for different and more diverse products has occurred, these different projects have really started to come together with the different colors, shapes, and work that we're doing in the different groups. Broccoli is the primary brassica vegetable in the US. It is also a bit of a one-hit wonder. It's dominated primarily by the crown cut market, even though you get some sprouting types, for example. I've been part of the SCRI East Coast Broccoli Project for the last 10, 11 years. And that's been a multi-state effort to try and develop broccoli better suited to the climatic conditions on the East Coast. And as part of that effort, we've been developing materials that are more tolerant, for instance, of heat when it comes to the crown quality. And that's involved a lot of regional testing, working with a lot of the big seed companies like Semina, Syngenta, Bejo. And right now we have a couple of co-hybrids in advanced trials with those companies as varieties that would suit not just the East Coast, but also other areas where you have more variable climate. That effort has been a lot of focus on developing inbreds, CMS lines, complementation, but it's also merged with efforts for color and diversity that I've had across the cabbage groups. So broccoli tends to fall in the lighter green to darker blue-green leaf type, and you also see that in the broccoli crown. So most of the broccoli crowns are a dark green to a blue-green color. But what we've been trying to do is to try and expand out that variation a little bit to create new and different market classes of broccoli. The plants that I have here are actually F1 combinations from the greenhouse, so they don't fully show the trait differences. But this is a hybrid between regular broccoli and golden broccoli. So it's intermediate in leaf color and in crown color. If it was later in the season, we'd have the golden broccolis in the field. We also have combinations with kale material to form Tuscan broccoli, which has this Savoy leaf type in the broccoli background. and we brought in the anthocyanins for Burgundy broccoli. So while you have golden broccoli, Tuscan broccoli, and Burgundy broccoli, in these cases they're all intermediate because they've been crossed to the regular broccoli leaf types. But it will give opportunities then to have more color variation in broccoli crowns and sprouts. And we've also found through preliminary nutritional and consumer studies that you get different tastes, textures, and eating qualities from the different colored brassicas. So for instance, if you have the golden type of collard or kale, they tend to be milder, more tender. Where if you have the more blue-green type, they tend to be maybe a little bit more bitter, a little tougher. So the kale effort is interesting because it initiated, as I mentioned, in East Africa probably 13 or 14 years ago. Sukuma wiki, or African kale. Sukuma wiki in Swahili means to push the week, have enough food for the week. It's a brassica that you can harvest weekly throughout the season instead of risking everything on a single crop like a cabbage or a broccoli. So we'd initially started off with that project with black rot resistance, but as the US kale market developed, we really started to put a big effort in that direction. Kale is a bit of a generic term for a leafy brassica. Primarily, there are the curly types, which are the most common, the boracore types. There's the savoid or crinkle types, which are the lacinato or the Tuscan. And there's the flat leaf types, which are the collard kale, the forage kale types. So we also see the jagged leaf types, but that's more associated with the Russian or Siberian kales, which are in the Brassica napus group, not in the Brassica oleracea group. A large focus over the last few years has been on the lacinato type. There's certain benefits to working on it in the fact it tends to have more self-compatibility for seed production. And like broccoli, it's also a pretty limited group. The Cavolo de Nero, lacinato dinosaur type, it tends to just be this blue-green crinkle type of OPs that are not particularly vigorous. So among the quality traits, we've been bringing in the leaf color differences and the color from the anthocyanin. So instead of the blue-green type, we can then end up with leaf types that have the golden leaf or the green leaf type. That's determined genetically and by the wax content on the leaf. But what we're also able to do is combine the leaf type with the anthocyanins. So we can start producing, for example, golden Tuscan kale with a purple vein, or we can produce green Tuscan with a purple vein, or blue-green Tuscan with a purple vein. The association among consumers with kale is typically as a dark leafy green vegetable. A lot of the mainstream salad crops tend to be more golden green. If you look at romaine or arugula, and so the familiarity is perhaps more in the golden green category. So while we have limited materials to show because it's early in the season and these are just out of the greenhouse, what we've been doing is having a focus on a diverse medley of Tuscan kale types, working on golden Tuscan, green Tuscan, blue-green Tuscan, purple Tuscan, and also golden Tuscan with a purple vein, green Tuscan with a purple vein. And we can also then put that into a Tuscan collard type, and we have a lot in that group. Tuscan having the Savoy as opposed to, say, a flat leaf collard like this, which would be a golden collard with a purple vein. So having them all in the same market class background has some interesting benefits from a sort of spring mix standpoint, because you can grow them in the same area under the same conditions, and you're going to have a similar product that just varies a lot with color, but it's also going to vary somewhat with the eating texture and appearance. The US market for leafy brassicas is dominated by the salad market, and there's certain criteria that make a leafy type desirable for the salad market. A lot of that is determined by this texture and structure within the leaf. When you produce a salad, the texture will contribute a number of traits of importance. The volume it gives it makes the meal look larger. The texture gives it more structure and shelf life stability. But it also helps to develop a crunch to be able to hold the salad dressing, for example. Food scientists maybe wouldn't agree in the fact that if you have a very crinkled or very curly type, there's more places for pathogens to hide out at, but there's also more places for the salad dressing to attach to and hide out at. So an effort currently is focused on the kale types, primarily within the Tuscan, but also within the curly and the flat leaf for the mature markets, with an increase in focus on the baby green markets. The baby green markets are a group that are increasing significantly for multiple reasons, including technology and venture capital investment in things like vertical farms. People also have a higher demand for pre-mixed spring green salads, and in that they like a lot of difference in color, texture, and shape and taste among the crops. So right now we're also trying to take these groups and find which ones might be more suited to the baby green market, particularly ones that add something that's a little bit more diverse or unusual to the mix. The Tuscan kales certainly fall into that category. The curly kales less so, because seed production is more difficult, and the flat leaf less so because the flat leaf doesn't have that crunch. Salad dressing tends to slip off it, and they tend to be more for the cooked market than from the raw leafy green market. There certainly is demand for leaf structure and shape changes. So that's something that we have been increasingly looking at, trying to identify lines that are vigorous seed producers. So these are what I would call jagged leaf selections. And you can see that we can take a highly jagged leaf, we could take a moderately jagged leaf, or we could take a flatter jagged leaf. So there's variations in the extent of how jagged the leaf is. People are more familiar with this in the Russian kale background, red Russian, white Russian, Siberian frills. Fizz is a Brassica oleracea that's out there from Tosa that has some jagged leaf look to it. But what we're looking at these for primarily is the baby green market, not the mature market. With the expansion of the vertical farms, the expansion of the organic spring green mixes and the expansion of brassicas within spring mixes to start with. We're looking at lines that will contribute some unique looks and types while also being functional for the seed production. So we're looking at these with a number of companies, and we can take the highly jagged, the moderately jagged, or we could even do a really incredibly jagged type as a mature type and combine in the pigmented leaf type. So the brassicas are generally a very interesting group. They have a common and established association with nutrition. Kale is high in a number of vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin K. It's also high in some of the carotenoids like zeaxanthin and lutein that are important in macular or eye health. So increasing their presence in spring green mixes is both desirable and I think offers huge opportunity just because of the huge variation that exists within Brassica oleracea as a species. So a lot of what we've really been doing is focused on the look and the color and the taste and the texture, but it's really a type of fusion breeding, you might say. So taking desirable consumer traits from one market class, introducing them to another market class. And by doing that, we've been able to introduce the golden leaf trait to several market classes of brassicas, and they are now starting to get into advanced testing and line development, both as releases as OPs, but also as releases as F1 CMS hybrids.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.